Right now on Upfront.
The GOP battle for Wisconsin.
I can't imagine Donald Trump winning Wisconsin. He lost it in 20.
Republicans at their statewide convention this weekend, just days after GOP presidential frontrunner, former President Donald Trump, appears in federal court. Now, weeks ahead of the first presidential primary debate in Wisconsin, our guest this Sunday, Republican Party of Wisconsin Chairman Brian Schimming.
Then, campus funding controversy.
People on the left, it's become their new religion. They no longer go to church on Sunday.
Republicans threatening to cut tens of millions from the University of Wisconsin system budget over diversity, equity, and inclusion. The governor this weekend now threatening a budget veto. UW System President Jay Rothman is here. His testimony before the state Senate just hours away.
And the bipartisan votes.
Some of the negotiations were stressful. Some of them involved some shouting.
Lawmakers approving the shared revenue agreement. Milwaukee this weekend, a step closer to raising the sales tax. Some Milwaukee Democrats blasting the final deal.
You should be ashamed of yourselves.
The latest from the Capitol with a critical week ahead.
This is Upfront with Jaron Jordan and political director Matt Smith.
Hi, everyone, and thanks for joining us. A lot to get to this weekend. The budget battle now intensifying and new threats of a veto from Governor Tony Evers.
This is Republicans wrapping up their state convention today, meeting in La Crosse ahead of what will be an incredibly wild 2024 with Wisconsin front and center. Brian Schimming is chair of the Republican Party of Wisconsin. He joins us now. Brian, good to see you.
Great to see you.
Delegates are headed back home after a busy weekend this weekend. 2024, it's fair to say, in full swing. What is your need? What is your ask of them right now?
Well, it's great to be in La Crosse this weekend. That is the site of one of our biggest victories of 2022, which was the pickup of that 26-year long-held Democrat congressional seat by Derek Van Orden, the Republican. So it's great to be in a spot of one of our many victories in the last couple of years. So really, this convention for me, in many ways, is a grassroots convention. It's a time to get together, to unify, to talk about what's to come in 2024. You know, I always say Wisconsin isn't one of 50 states. We're one of 5. And that is particularly the case in this presidential election cycle.
The RNC, as you know, just launched a new effort urging Republicans to vote early. I'm curious, in your mind, in Wisconsin, how critical is this and how difficult will it be, given some prominent Republicans like the former president had urged voters not to do this for years?
Yeah, it's not only critical, it's just we have to do it. As you know, I spoke out about this in my early days of being chairman of the party. I've been doing it nationally as well. I was in Washington last week talking about this with national media. And I don't think it's something we'd like to do. It's something we have to do. I say to Republicans across the state, look, we can't keep going into election day, 200,000 votes down, and make it up in 13 hours. It's just the arithmetic does not work. But I will say to you, as I've moved around the state in my 6 months as chair here, as I've moved around the state, I get a lot of acceptance to it. I think a couple years ago, we would not have been able to get people as interested in this topic. I'm getting it all the time now. And I'm speaking to Republicans every chance I get, and I will at this convention as well. And I'm going to be very direct about it. We get people to early vote or we lose. That simple.
You mentioned messages coming from the presidential candidates. Trump right now is the front runner as we sit here today. He pleaded not guilty this past week to 37 federal charges. I'm curious, as chairman of the party of one of the most critical states in the country, do you want him to win the nomination here in Milwaukee?
Well, I'll say this. The advantage we've got, I mean, the Democrats are stuck with Joe Biden. They literally are stuck with a president who only a third of their party supporters want to run again. Literally, he's only got in the mid-30s of their own. He's got over 60% of the Democrats not wanting him to run again. She is also, Kamala Harris is also unpopular. So they're in a bad place this cycle. I like my chances because I have a bench of candidates, not only the former president, but obviously Governor Ron DeSantis, Nikki Haley, Senator Tim Scott, now Chris Christie, Vivek Ramaswamy. I've got a long bench of potential candidates for Republican primary voters to go in and vote for. So no matter who it is, I've got a long bench with great choices. They have a very short bench with a choice even Democrats don't like.
You were at the DeSantis event a few weeks ago in central Wisconsin. Paul Ryan, as we know, a Trump critic, said again this past week, Trump cannot win Wisconsin. Do you agree with that analysis?
I don't agree with that analysis, and the numbers, frankly, don't agree with that analysis. The president has either been ahead or a little bit behind President Biden. Look, these polls change from week to week. What I know is they have, regardless of whether a person or not likes Donald Trump, the truth of the matter almost shows every poll shows him being competitive with Joe Biden. So I don't agree with Paul on that matter. And I think the information out there bears that out. But time will tell.
One of the resolutions you addressed this weekend, Republicans, the party wants to move Wisconsin's August primary. To where and why?
There's been a lot of talk. Of course, at one time it was September, and they moved it back up into August. And I talked to a lot of Democrats who want this too. They're interested in having an early primary, frankly, for the parties to kind of focus on who their candidates are and not to have a long-winded, sometimes, as we know, damaging primary going until just a matter of weeks before the November election. So I think both parties have got some interest there.
Where would you like it, and how realistic do you think that is?
Well, you get a lot of talk, of course, because you move it much earlier than August. You end up in the summer, and that's probably not ideal either. A lot of folks say let's move it up till April, which is what it is in some states. So I think that takes some examination, but it's one where I think there's a lot of support there.
Chairman of the Republican Party of Wisconsin, Brian Shimon. Brian, like always, good to see you. Thank you.
Great to see you and great to be here.
Let's bring in Charles Franklin now, Marquette Law School poll director. Charles, it's good to have you here.
Good to be here.
What is the current mood of Republican voters heading into 2024?
Well, I think the number one issue is that they don't like Joe Biden and they can unite around a candidate opposed to Biden, or at least that's their hope. The other is, of course, the question of who's their nominee going to be and how enthusiastic will they be about their nominee.
Yeah, there is such a growing field of candidates already. What's the biggest challenge, do you think, for Republicans heading into 2024?
Well, I think there are real divisions within the party. We saw the division between the Donald Trump forces and the state party establishment, especially criticisms of Speaker Robin Vos, for example, conflicts around the 2020 election, and challenges within the party in primaries that have divided the party. Finally, after coming off of a loss in the governor's race last year and a loss in the presidential race, I think there is some pessimism among Republicans that they've been losing some of the big races that they think of themselves as deserving to win.
What do you think is helping Republicans? What are their biggest strengths heading into 2024?
I think that the number one is you're running against an incumbent president. And so all of the things you want to criticize the current state of the country for, you have an opportunity to do that in criticizing President Biden. I think the other strength is, having gone through the wilderness of losses, is this a time that the party unites? And as I say, right now they're a bit divided, but there's the potential for uniting. Lastly, if Donald Trump is the nominee, he has proven that he's able to mobilize voters who otherwise often sit out elections. So he could be a boost to turnout. On the other hand, who the nominee is still a potentially very divisive issue within the party, and we just don't know how that'll turn out and whether the party unites behind whoever the eventual nominee is.
Still a lot to watch for. You're going to be watching it all. Always good to have you here for your insight and analysis. Charles Franklin, thank you.
Thank you.
Democratic Party of Wisconsin Chairman Ben Wickler was our guest last Sunday. You can watch his interview streaming right now at WISN.com/upfront or on Very Local. Up next, the UW system in the political crosshairs this weekend.
Republicans threatening to cut tens of millions from its budget. The governor threatening a veto. UW system president Jay Rothman standing by next.